Thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Alex Winder. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Middle East Studies. I'm very happy today to introduce Dr. Orwa Switat, who needs no introduction if you've been paying attention to Middle East Studies in the past couple of months. You know he's organized a number of fantastic discussions, virtual reality exhibitions, panel discussions, webinars. And today we get to hear a bit about his own work. I won't spend any more time giving an introduction. We'll turn it directly over to Dr. Orwa. Thank you so much, Orwa, for coming and for giving your talk, People in Ruins, Remapping Narrative in Demolished Spaces in Haifa. He'll talk and show some short films. That'll take about an hour, and then we'll have about half an hour for question and answer. So we look forward to your presentation and to a robust discussion. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Alex. And of course, Ilyas and Barbara and Shara, who's not with us physically, but he's with us in his minds and support. So, and thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. You know, this event ends our series of different activities under the title of People and Ruins, Remapping Demolished Spaces and Displaced Narratives. And I'm really privileged to be at the center, I must say, and to be with you today. So thank you for everything. I would like to start with sharing with you my personal story. Why I'm here. So 7 years ago, while I was finishing my PhD about the status of groups in urban planning, focusing on London planning, I was appointed to be a member of the Haifa Municipal Committee for Historical Preservation. I was the first Arab in such position. I was one of 6, and I was very honored, happy, and privileged to represent my community and to have an impact for the first time on planning in my city. And I was very excited because I succeeded, or at least I thought I did, in shifting and the policy from destruction to preservation, especially among the historical neighborhoods of Haifa. 3 years later, in November 2021, the municipality mapped a survey for the first time of the historical preservation of Haifa Ayr Tahtit, Haifa downtown. And honestly, when I saw the survey, I was furious. Because first, it ignored the indigenous history and narrative of Haifa. Second, it framed and named the Palestinian urban modern heritage and architecture, whether as semi-rural, British, mere Ottoman, or the Land of Israel architecture. And there was the absence of historical buildings excluded from the survey, exposing them to the threat of demolishing. And I remember myself sitting there at the table in Haifa City Hall, looking at them, on the professional planners of the municipality, asking them why. Telling them that your work is lacking. And I remember the answer that I got. There is no data. There is no map that shows the Arab spaces before 1948 in Haifa. A city, by the way, that was established in 1761 by Dahir al-Umar, who was the Arab leader of the Galilee. The maps were either German, like that. It's another one. Or British. And as you can see, this historical map, or the historical city of Haifa on this British map of 1945, you can see it as only plain blocks and streets. I insisted and refused to accept that. Luckily, according to the Israeli legal and planning procedures and norms, such a document needs consensus. Therefore, the survey failed to be approved, and it was rejected. 2 weeks later, they set a council meeting in the same hall, same hall, by the way, and they fired me. taking me out of the committee. And I remember the mayor of Haifa calling me, apologizing to me, telling me that she had no power to change the decision. And I remember the dilemma that I had. Either to say proudly, okay, you don't want me, no need, I will continue doing my work in other ways, or to say no, I won't give up. And tell you the truth, I was really confused because it shocked me. I was in my comfort zone doing my things, but now I'm standing in front of a regime, powerful political and economic structures. In that moment, I remember that I saw my late father's picture in our living room. In the wall, we have a drawing that draws one of his quotes, a sentence that says الدفاع عن الحق بوصلة الأخلاق والأخلاق جوهر الإيمان والإيمان بطيب الأعمال وهذا ما يبقى من الإنسان. In free translation, to stand for what is right is the compass of our moral soul. And morals form the essence of our deepest faiths. Faith finds its life in deeds that are noble and fair. And through these acts, humanity remains and lays bare. I immediately know what should I do. After the decision was published, there was an outrage in the community. And then I understood that it wasn't important only for me, it was important also for the community. And I understood how much the historical architecture and heritage is important for the indigenous people of Haifa. People organized themselves quickly, launched a campaign, held community meetings, signed petitions, both Arabs and Jews, who rejected this decision. These are photos from. So first, the municipality insisted and refused, but after a week of pressure, they reversed their decision. I returned to the committee, and the survey was revised. However, despite the beauty and the excitement of this accomplishment, I felt as an urban planning scholar that there was something missing, that there's a problem. The sentence that they told me, that there is no data, there is no map, there's no eligible data, stayed with me and couldn't leave me. In September 2023, I came here to Boston, doing my postdoc at Tufts in urban planning department, continuing my international work on the status of minority rights in Western cities. And I compared the status of groups in planning of London with American sanctuary cities. And I bring a new approach, which I frame as seeing the North from the South, which argues that scholars coming from the global North are either colorblind and didn't see the groups in the city, or when they saw the groups, they saw them only through their cultural characteristics, culturalized, not through their political and civic status and constitutional rights and their relations with the state. While scholars from the global South have focused on the state and its colonial practices driven by supremacist fantasies and ideologies in cities in the South, yet they less focused on the agency of the people, on the power of the people, framing them as passive, marginalized, oppressed victims. Therefore, seeing the North from the South means re-centralizing the role of the state in the city, bringing back the state to the city, the political and constitutional rights of groups in urban policies, and the group's power and agency in facing these policies and reclaiming their spaces. But then, the war happened. And I tried to continue my work and writing my book, but still seeing the destruction of Gaza and the steadfastness of the people around and in their ruins took me back to the trauma of my family and of my city, Haifa, whose historical old city was almost totally destroyed in 1948. And I couldn't stay in the North. I had to go back to my own South, to go back home. And I asked myself, how can ruins and remains of heritage shape the restoration of displaced spaces? How can memories and narratives help reimagine urban lives that have been destroyed? Any destruction is never complete. It's never total. And it will be always imperfect. There will be always ruins. So how do people revive, rebuild their identity, reconstitute their selves, reclaim their spaces, and remain resilient around the ruins of their city? And how can mapping, digitization, visualization, urban planning help us to uncover and restore these spaces? I argue that the ruins of displaced spaces and the remnants of cultural and religious spaces have signified the revival, resilience, and cultural resistance of indigenous people. Ruins have given people a space of meanings, narratives, and practices to face ongoing dispossession. The main challenge is epistemic and methodological. The city was destroyed, the people were shattered to pieces, the archives are concealed till today, and the spaces are still under ongoing destruction, constant threat. And by the way, I don't know if anyone here was in Haifa, visited Haifa once. Great. Have you heard about Suq al-Ishwam? A Levantine roofed market that included merchants coming from Syria and Lebanon. Have you heard about it, Abu? And do you know where it was exactly? Yes, but yeah. What about Cafe Lijreni? Cafe Lijreni. Saraya governmental building. Kasbar Bath, the small hammam. El Jarhi Tower. Khan al-Sheikh Hassan al-Khatib. Everyone I interviewed, including leading historians and experts of Haifa, didn't know where they were exactly on the map. But how can we know? I'm going to show you today how we face this challenge, this epistemic challenge of absent knowledge. So we combined several methods. One, digitizing historical maps, oral history, and indigenous archives, and current governmental and real estate plans, analyzing the development of the urban form of Haifa since the establishment of the historical city. And so we mapped, for the first time we mapped, for example, the list of the Waqf spaces that was totally absent. No one knew where these places were. And in collaboration with the computer science department at BU, Boston University, we have developed also an AI software that restores historical demolished spaces through building 3D models generated from images. A discourse analysis, including interviews with 40 historians, scholars, planners, architects, activists, and displaced communities. I managed to search and find refugees from Haifa in Rome, in London, Eastern Connecticut, all over, because the interviews that were made, there are more than 40, 50 interviews were made with Palestinian refugees from Haifa, but all of them couldn't be mapped. The interviews were general, but the people who made the interviews didn't ask them with a map. So I had to do new interviews. Third, visualizing narratives and practices of people in the historical parts of the city, around and in the ruins and the remains of their city. Based on that, we developed a model of restoring demolished spaces. The project started during my previous postdoc at Harvard Divinity School with the Graduate School of Design, which was also, unfortunately, was a part of a project called RCPI. It was shut down after years of important work. And the research included a team of 12 members, students from Harvard Graduate School of Design, along with local planners, researchers, and filmmakers and storytellers from Haifa. While now I continue the work through my postdoc, luckily I'm privileged to be here at Brown, and while developing also this collaboration with the Faculty of Computing and Data Science at Boston University. In 1948, the old city of Haifa was destroyed. You can see this is Haifa before 1948. And this is after. The erasure was incomplete, leaving the city with ruins and traces of its heritage. This is the map that we built, Haifa before 48. This is what remained out of it after 48. Today, the historical city appears like that, obscured by governmental buildings, real estate projects, the courthouse, which were constructed on top of the ruined city. I'm excited now to show you the first restorative indigenous map of Haifa. On the map, you can see the digitization of every building, every stairs, also the alleys, the streets, with a focus on cultural spaces, combined with the digitization of memories and indigenous archives. The map shows a unique cosmopolitan indigenous urban form of Haifa. I know it sounds odd, cosmopolitan and indigenous in the same time, but this is how Haifa, old town, was. 13 diverse neighborhoods, tailored by the hybrid integration and mixture of religious spaces. You can see on the map 3 mosques in green, 4 churches in yellow, and 5 synagogues in blue. 17 markets, 12 khans, 3 towers, 3 gates, 1 fortress, El Saraya governmental building, 9 schools, 6 bakeries, 3 pharmacies, theaters, cinemas, cafes, restaurants, hotels, 5 squares, 99 wells, 2 public baths, 2 public gardens, hospitals, mills, stairs, alleys, internal passages, cemeteries, maqams, sacred monuments, and Waqf religious community spaces. This is the map of the Waqf only. All of this is gone, almost. Thousands of families from diverse communities living together in a wide diversity of architectural styles, using materials of sandstones, usually on the first floors, Mount Carmel stones, and plaster on the top floors, with flat brick roofs. Evolved according to different historical, political, and spatial transformations. Now we know that under the street, there was a cemetery. That under this courthouse building was a school. Now I know that these ruins in the Maronite stairs near the Communist Party newspaper was a Muslim school. Now I know that this street was a Muslim Waqf religious space, and that Ma'arat Eliyahu synagogue was Al Khadr Muslim Waqf that was open in all its history to all religions to pray and light a candle in it. And that under this Telefonia building was a religious sacred land. And that under this street, in front of the small mosque, El Masjid al-Saghir, was a gate and the historical arcs. Now I know that near Lijrani Mosque was the church market, the Knisi market, connecting the mosque with the church. And that under this street, in the governmental center of Haifa, was Khan al-Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Sahli, that under this street, in front of the Orthodox Historical Church, was the Orthodox School of Girls, and next to it, one for boys. And near them, near the Holy Mary Church, was the Catholic School for boys. Now we know where was Suq al-Shwam, the Levantine market of Haifa, the fish market, the yogurt market, the watermelon market, the chicken market, 17 markets. Now I know where Kulthum sang when she, the famous Egyptian singer, when she came in Haifa in Bustan al-Inshirah. And now I know that under this parking lot, there was one of the most dense neighborhoods of historical Haifa. Now I know what the ruins were. The ruins that I used to see every day in my neighborhood. By restoring the displaced spaces, I have also restored displaced spatial language. Midan, Saha, Khan, Yakhur, Hosh. Different categories of squares and yards. Ard, Mawqa, Hara, Mahalla, Hakura, Karm, Bustan. Different definitions of semi-private, semi-public gardens, parks, and semi-open, semi-closed neighborhoods. Zukaq, Sibat, Mamar, Bawabi, different categories of passages. All are indigenous categories of spaces and uses. Today, it's difficult for us even to imagine them, to reimagine them in Haifa. And we even can't understand. We can't understand them, and we can't think about them when we see our neighborhoods every day because they were demolished. Restoring the demolished spaces opened the possibility to restore the indigenous categories of these spaces, the spatial language and the narrative, spaces that you can see and comprehend from above. From the restoration of these ruins, we developed a restorative planning model by reimagining and reconstructing a part of the demolished city. So we focus on the parking lot by restoring its historical, cosmopolitan, indigenous DNA of urban form to face, not ignore, the current urban realities. So this is the parking lot, and we mapped every building, then we traced it through photos, and then we built the model. And from there, we started to make a plan for it. And from there, we are rebuilding our neighborhood on the current reality. It's only like images. So to the left is the parking lot, and this is part of the restorative model. These only are the ruins that are left from the parking lot. And from that ruins, we started to rebuild it and to reimagine it. This project is not only about Haifa, but it deals with the critical question concerning communities and spaces that got devastated, either by massive fires, hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, or herbicides, spatiocides, wars, and ongoing dispossession, climate and human-made catastrophes. However, after every disaster, communities can revive again and recollect their shattered pieces. The research shows that ruins reposition people, and people reposition ruins. After the destruction, ruins remain. Even after decades, people go to the ruins, reclaiming them through their daily practices and counter-narratives. Wide urban planning scholarship has related to dispossession in various ways and the role of planning and the states in displacement. Yusuf Jabarin's recent work on the architecture of dispossession argues that it's shaped by three logics: the political logic of exclusion of presence, the economic logic of making profit or accumulation by displacement, and the aesthetic logic of dispossession based on supremacy and the legitimization of architectural violence. Building on this work, I argue that the people counter dispossession by repositioning themselves around and in the ruins and the remains of their cultural and religious spaces based on three countering logics. How? First, they are driven by an indigenous counter-aesthetic logic that views ruins as beauty, as the foundation of their concepts also of justice and rights. When they see ruins, they are thrilled. They are in great enjoyment, and they are moved. They imagine and practice return. But this enjoyment is always lacking, combined with the pain and the heartbreak of a lost city. Second, the research shows that people develop their own economic logic for the protection of the remains of their heritage, facing shifting dynamics of dispossession and urban renewal processes. They even use capitalization practices, using the margins of the free market for an indigenous decolonial agenda, which I frame as repositioning by decolonial capitalization. When new liberal colonial states withdraw from society and from the market, it appears that it opens new venues for indigenous groups to operate and to reposition. Lastly, people develop how they live and conceive the ruins and the remains of their places, turning daily and cultural practices around and in them into cultural resistance. The dynamics between people and ruins reposition the status of both. So people reposition ruins and ruins reposition people through the physicality and the meanings of the ruins, the materiality of the ruins. People revive, resist, and are resilient to disposition. While through the people's practices and narratives, ruins are being reclaimed, protected, restored, renovated, and reimagined. These dynamics shift revival from the place you were displaced to become a return to the place that you were displaced from. It also shifts the static steadfastness, sumud, holding on the ground, facing all the storms, to a more dynamic and adaptive, resilient practice. And also it shifts the practice of resistance as protest or as an insurgency to a cultural resistance, which makes every individual practice, social practice, a type of a cultural resistance. That's what we will see now in 5 films. I will screen 5 short films to be added to other films of different cultural and religious sites that will be on the map, that will be digital map. There will be a website that we are building, and the website will be open to everyone, and it will be launched soon. So please stay tuned. You will see 5 different stories of how ruins reposition people. 5 films that amplify the voices of people and ruins in Haifa. First, I want to show you the story of how Palestinians reclaim their religious spaces. You will see how even after 40 years, the church in yellow was reopened to become the house of grace. And how after 60 years, the mosque in green was revived and became the center of the community.
المطران حجار، غرغوريوس حجار، اللي كمان لقينا قبره طريق الصدفة. احنا عارفين انه مدفون تحت الهيكل، بس الكنيسة كانت مهجورة 40 سنة وكان فيها كتير أوساخ وطم اللي المحل اتغطى، وبشي مرحلة الهيكل أرضيته هفتت، حيفا، وإحنا نرممها لقينا الغرفة هاي ولقينا الضريح، يعني لقينا رفاته، فرتبنا الوضع هون وحطينا الشايش، حطينا التذكار. هاي هي كنيسة السيدة من جوا، أنهوا بنائها بال 1862 وكانت الكاتدرائية الأولى للروم الملكيين الكاثوليك. بعد ال 48 الكنيسة انهجرت لمدة 40 سنة، وبال 1982 إجا حياة الوالد رممها وأقام إلى جانبها بيت النعمة. المرحوم كميل شحادة حياة الوالد بصباه وشبابه كان نشيط سياسياً، وبمرحلة معينة لما اجت عنده الفكرة انه هو يكرس حياته وخدماته من اجل الضعيف بالمجتمع، تعرف على الوالدة اللي اجت من سويسرا تتطوع هون بحيفا. قرروا يبلشوا حياة كزوج، وهاي كانت كمان بداية بيت النعمة اللي بدارن الخاصة اللي كانوا مستأجرينها أول طريقاً. بعد أسبوعين من زواج كان في استقبلوا 2 سجناء مسرحين اللي ما كان في عندهم وين يتواجدوا، وهن استقبلوهن لحتى يساعدوهن بالتأقلم من جديد بقلب المجتمع. وهيك بلشت قصة بيت النعمة. وبشي مرحلة كانوا بحاجة لمحل شوي أكبر، والفكرة اللي اجت عند حياة الوالد هو انه يرجع يحيي الكاتدرائية الأولى تبعت الروم الملكيين الكاثوليك في حيفا. طبعاً الكنيسة بقيت كنيسة وفعالة، إلى جانبها تأسست كمان مؤسسة بيت النعمة اللي بلشت تقدم من خلال السجناء وحالات مستعصية بالمجتمع خدمات اجتماعية لكافة الناس اللي موجودة بالمجتمع الحيفاوي ومحيط حيفا. الموقع تبع الكنيسة المبنى اليوم بين كل هاي العمارات هو معبر جدا. يعني أول إشي الحارة اللي انهدمت وكانت متروكة وكانت محل اللي الناس بداش تفوت عليه، بمحاولة لطمس المعالم اللي كانت هون وبناء كل المؤسسات والمكاتب الحكومية حوالين هذا المبنى اللي هو الكنيسة وبعض المباني القليلة جدا بالحارة هون. غاد تقدر تشوف نوع من التناقض، بس كمان نوع من الحقيقة اللي احنا موجودين فيها. يعني احنا موجودين داخل بقلب كل المجمع الحكومي اللي موجود حوالينا، فمن جهة ناس بتطلعوا عليها انه الكنيسة تغطت، واذا انا بدي اخذها محل متفائل اكثر انا بقول انه لا، احنا القلب، احنا اللؤلؤة بقلب هذا المباني المونسترز الوحشية اللي بنوها الكبيرة الضخمة اللي حوالينا. ففي إشي جميل هذا، يعني في دور للمحل رغم محاولة إخفائه عن العين، بس هو موجود من جوا. خلينا نعرف أغلب المعالم أموها. هاي ساحة كميل شحادة حياة الوالد اللي فترة الثمانينات حتى التسعينات كانت جزء من الساحات المكشوفة والمفتوحة. هون كان في بيوت، كان في عائلات ساكنة، قسم منها ترك البلاد تهجر والبيوت تركت فاضي وبعدين تم هدمها. واليوم احنا موجودين بالساحة اللي انعملت لذكرى حياة الوالد تقديراً لأعماله اللي قام فيها من نقل للبلد هون حيفا وترميم الكنيسة والحفاظ عليها وإقامة بيت النعمة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
مسجد الجريني هو ثاني مسجد يبنى في مدينة حيفا. مئذنة المسجد قصفت بالحرب 48 وحتى الآن يعني لم يعاد ترميمها. المسجد بني سنة 1775 في منطقة منخفضة، وكانت هذه المنطقة تعتبر سوق كبير اللي يسمى سوق الشوام. هذه الأسواق اليوم مش موجودة لأنه هدمت بأمر من رئيس بلدية حيفا أبو خوشي. كل المعالم اللي كانت أثرية انتهت إلا هذا المسجد اللي إحنا موجودين فيه. أهم العمارة هاي الكبيرة اليوم إحنا بنشوفها عمارة الصاروخ سموها. هاي العمارة بنيت على السرايا العثمانية. طبعا ما بقي لنا من السرايا العثمانية اللي هو فقط اسم الشارع اللي بفصل بين المسجد وبين العمارة الحكومي اللي موجود اليوم. هذا الشارع بسموه شارع السرايا. هاي الصورة هي الوصف الكامل للمسجد. هاي المئذنة اللي هي مش موجودة اليوم. إذا بنلاحظ هنا في هنا زي سفن صغيرة. هذه السفن ببين إنه كانت قريبة من المسجد. طبعا هنا نلاحظ إنه كان في حياة، يعني في ناس بالتجارة إلى آخره. ولكن في صورة من الخلف هذا المدخل الرئيسي للمسجد الجريني. من هون كان المدخل الرئيسي اللي هو من الخلف، وهذا السوق يعني كان السوق محيط من كل المسجد. فهي هنا في بسطات وفي ناس كانت تقعد. وهي صورة لحيفا، يعني هذا الصورة بتبين كمان المئذنة مرة ثانية، ببين البرج، ببين كل حيفا من اتجاه البحر. المسجد طبعا كان مخطط لهدمه، وكان في اتفاقية في الطابو انذار. الانذار شو بقول انه في شركة مشتري المسجد هذا اللي احنا موجودين فيه، وانه ينهدم المسجد ويبنى مكانه بناء يعني 13 طابق. بالطابق 13 يعطى للمسلمين مسجد بدون مئذنة، مصلى 100 متر. هاي الاتفاقية. طبعا اللي احنا فحصنا تفاجأنا وتواجدوا في المسجد هنا يعني استاذ عيد السويطات رحمه الله تعالى، كان فريد حسين، سامي شريف اللي انه محاميه، وطلبنا منهم انه تعالوا عم نفحص وضع هذا المسجد. فاحنا وصلوا معنا لمحكمة العدل العليا. محكمة العدل العليا قررت انه احنا ندفع للشركة مبلغ 3 مليون شيكل. اللجنة طبعا اللي تشكلت من المتولين اتفقنا مع الشركة انه ندفع لهم 1 مليون شيكل، ودفعنا الشركة، وهيك حررنا المسجد وحررنا مع المقبرة اللي هي محاذي المسجد الاستقلال بإذن الله تعالى عز وجل. واليوم احنا في وضع يعني نحمد ربنا انه يعني المسجد اصبح كثير مهم جدا، خاصة بعد بيوت انفتح قاعة بيوت العزاء والوفود يعني المصلين، حتى المصلين يعني اعداد المصلين بتوصل باعداد كبيرة الى المسجد، يعني لدرجة انه اصبح يضيق بعدد المصلين يوم الجمعة وبأيام العيد.
ما أحلاها كانت تطلع، ما أجملها البيت هذا. تطلع شوفون هذا البيت، لا يعني إشي هذا حلو البيت. كيف الطاقات كانت الصغيرة. بس لما باجي على حيفا عن جد بطلع هيك كثير بتأثر على حيفا، لأنه حيفا كانت حلوة زمان. بلاقي شعور زمان كان أحلى من اليوم. كنت أحب هالبيوت القديمة، العقود، القناطر اللي بشوفها قبل. اليوم كلها راحتك مهدومة، هيك قلبي بيجعني عليها. نبقى أنا والبنات مروحين من المدرسة نمرق هذا الشارع. هذا الشارع لقدام كان حمام الباشا، هذا من 77 سنة ما شفته. كان بحيفا الحمام الباشا، والحمام الثاني كانوا نقول له حمام الصغير لأنه كان بسوق الشوام. هذا هو الحمام، هذا هو الحمام. الذكريات.
قلك معايا أجمل حكاية بالعمر كله.
شعوري يعني بعد الثورة بعد 77 سنة أفوت عليه يعني مبسوطة كتير. يعني اللي فتت أشوف الحمام اللي كنت جيت له أنا بنت 11 سنة. بس كتير متغير في أشياء كانت هون. هاي بركة المي مقيومة، هاي هون بتذكرها. هاي كانت تقعد هون المسؤولة، كانت تقعد هون، ومن هون كنا ننزل نفوت جوا. أهلين أهلين تدا مسلم خا، أهلا أهلا أهلين تدا لخا أهلين. إذا كنا ننزل من هون ونفوت لجوا على الحمام جوا. أنا ولدت في 1936. إحنا من أهل حيفا القدم، وعشت طفولتي. أنا خلقت بوادي الصليب وعشت طفولتي بوادي الصليب. بدي أقعد وين كانت تقعد المسؤولة بالحمام، ولما كانت تأخذ المصاري على الراس كانوا يحسبوا. يعني هاي قاعدة من العمر، قاعدة هاي من 77 سنة. كنا ننزل على حمام الباشا بالأسبوع مرة، أمي مع ستي مع خالاتي كلنا نلتقي مع بعض. لازم تعرفي يروحوا، كانت مجموعة يعني زي كان يعني يوم كيف. كان في مي سخنة، مي سخنة كتير، مي أخاف. نفوت تدريجيا. بعدين كل غرفة كان فيها جرن، وبالجرن في حنفيات تنتين، مي للباردة ومي للسخنة. وبإيش كنا نتحمم؟ في جنطاس كانوا يقولوا له، جنطاس كانوا يقولوا له. هاي عبارة عن كيلة. صيرت أمي الطول من الجرن وصير تحمم فينا. نتحممش كل الوقت ونطلع، لا، نضلنا ساعتين وإحنا بالحمام. كل نص ساعة تعيد أمي إنه تحممنا كمان مرة. أنا بدي أحكي لك عن بعض الطقوس اللي كانت موجودة بالحمام. تعرف زمان ما كانش في محلات إنه يروحوا النساء يطلعوا يروحوا ويجوا، لأنه كانت الناس أول النسوان يغطوا على وجوهن. فأحلى إشي كان عندنا هو الحمام. بالحمام كانوا يجيبوا العروس، تعرف يظبطوا العروس، يعملوا لها دق وغنانة ورقص بقلب الحمام. ولما يحمموها للعروس يعني كانت متعة مع دق وغنانة ورقص. كانت أيام حلوة كتير، لأنه ما كان في إنه الناس تطلع وتيجي زي اليوم. كان عندها أيام وأشياء محدودة إنه وين يروح ويجي. فكانوا إمتى يعملوها؟ لما يعملوا بالحمام، فيعزموا الأهل للعروس. تعرف للعروس تتحمم، وبتعرف يلبسوها يحضروها للزواج من الحمام. ما أحلى هالشبابيك اللي بجنن، اللي بعد زي كيف كانوا أول. بس كيف كان التراث أحلى. تشوف هيك التراث العربي التركي على زمان العثمانيين، يعني كان إشي عن جد من الآخر. شوف ما أحلى هالقواس هاي اللي موجودة، يعني صارت تحول من حمام كانت الناس تيجي تتحمم تحول لإشي تاني، لمطعم.
بشار تعال نحكي عن مسرح خشب. مسرح مستقل في حيفا بالبلد التحتة.
صار لنا هون 10 سنين بهذا المبنى.
10 سنين بقلب ال 220 متر اللي بنحبن كثير.
عصفور كان ينط من شقة لشقة بقلب القفص مثل المجنون. بكره بتعود. القفص صغير.
احنا ومجموعة من الفنانين أقمنا هذا المسرح وكملنا هيك سوا. بشار مخرج ومدير الفني، أنا مديري إدارية، بس التسميات لأنها هيك شوي غريبة. هاي من ضمن إننا بنعمل البرمجة وبنشتغل مرات على البار وبنظبط الكراسي وبنمسح الحمامات وبنكنس وبنعمل كل إشي. فإنه مش بس إحنا بنتعامل مع المكان كبيت.
بدكم تروحوا تمرقوا على محطة القطار بدون ما يفتشوكوا؟ بدكم تدخلوا على محطة الباص بدون ما يطخوكوا؟
كانت البداية الأساسية إنه في مجموعة عم ندور على إنه بدنا نكون مستقلين، بمعنى إنه إحنا بنرفض ناخذ أيادة دعم من دولة الاحتلال. محل مصر إنه يكون هو الفاعل الأساسي، هو اللي بيطلع على الأشياء، هو اللي بيقول شو مهم له إسا وشو اللي حاسه صح إسا، بدون ما يكون علقان بدويرة منهكة تبعت أفعال من دولة استعمارية، وكل الوقت أنت غاطس لأنك محتاجة مادياً.
اللي إحنا حاولنا نعمله هون إنه يكون في جدران زي هدول الحيطان ال4 متر ب4 متر تبعون القناطر العربية، تكون في حيطان صلبة اللي تقدر الناس تتحرك من جواتها بدون ما تخاف.
باين عليكم خايفين. جاهزين؟ ما فيش إشي بخوف هون. هون كل شي تمام، كل شي حلو هون. صح مايسترو؟
المبنى من برا هو يعني بشع، كيف شو صار فيه مع الزمن، وضعه بالحاره، المباني اللي حواليه كانه ولا بتتوقع انه في جوا عقد عربي. صح. بعد بتذكر قديش كان كانه مبهر فكره انه انت فايت من حيفا اللي شكلا انت كانه متعود عليها، اللي هي مبنى مربع مهمل من برا، حواليه محاكم وازاز وما بعرف شو، فجاه بتفوت على هيك على عقد.
واحدة من الاشياء اللي جذبتنا بهذا المكان انه هو بيشبهنا يعني بيشبه كل إشي خاصه بالذاكرة الفلسطينية ببيوتنا، بانه تقدر تحس حالك عن جد ببيت حقيقي، مش بمكان اللي هو معماريا غريب عنك. بنيته الجوانية هيك زي اللي كل الوقت بتعبطك.
طلعتوا على البيت اليوم؟ طلعنا على الدرج اليوم.
مش كنت بدك تطلعي؟
لوين؟
بدي اطلع اتمشى
لحالك؟
أنا بطلع معك.
خيتي تعبانة ولازم ترتاحي.
خليكي نسهر سوا.
مشتاق اتمشى بالبلد.
اليوم مشينا.
شكرا على العصفور جمال.
بدك بكره نطلع نسقي الوردات؟
يا بنتي شو نطلع نسقي الوردات؟ عملنا هيك زي مقاطع لتيزر انه شو صار بسنة الثلج، وجبنا ناس ختايري كبار بالعمر اللي كانوا عايشين بسنة الثلج. سيدي كان واحد منهن وحكى انه كنا ساكنين بالناصري، وقبل ما نروح على حيفا انا بعديها اشتغلت هون. بس ابوي كان عم بيصور كمان، بقول له ابوي وين هون؟ قال له هون بهذا المبنى. هذا المبنى كله كان مفتوح على بعضه، هاي عقود يعني يعني هاي عقود مفتوحة على بعضها كانت. هسه في هون كمان عقد المفروض يعني هذا نفس الدار أو نفس البيت، بقول له هون كان قاعد هون سيدي، بقول له هون بقول له وين هون يابا؟ قال له هون كان في منجرة أنا كنت أشتغل هون. هسه لما بقول لك يعني مكان بيشبهنا يعني هذا يعني زي اللي أنت بترجع بتكمل من وين سيدك كان.
اشتقت يطلعوني من الجرور، اشتقت لحالي، اشتقت أعرف مين أنا. صح أنا سكينة صينية، لكني أنا من جواتي أنا فلسطينية.
احنا كل الوقت فكرنا انه لازم نمتلك هذا المبنى، وعارفين انه هاي نقطة ضعف كثير كبيرة انه احنا بس مستأجرينه. خلص العقد والزلمة مش مستعد يحكي معنا، يعني حتى تليفون. واضح انه الخلفية السياسية يعني بدوش يسمع ولا اي امكانية انه احنا نضلنا كمان ربع يوم بعد بهذا المبنى. بعد
صاحب المبنى الجديد نجح يشتري المبنى لانه ماديا بيقدر يشتري المبنى، وصار اقوى منا بهاي المرحله. بتحس بالقلب تركان هذا المبنى، بس بنفس الوقت فيش عنا احساس بانه هذا نهايه مشروع، بالعكس هذا بده يعمل تحول بشكل المشروع لمرحله. والتجربه الجاي لما نكون جاهزين لنرجع نأسس بيت جديد لخشبي، لازم تكون من البداية مع خطة شراء.
أنا هشام نفاع، محرر وكاتب في جريدة الاتحاد من سنوات طويلة وفترات طويلة. الاتحاد عملياً لما بدأت بأيار 1944 كان في معركة على مستقبل، على وجه، حتى على وجود هذا الشعب وهذا الوطن. الجريدة كانت هي ناطقة باسم عصبة التحرر الوطني، أول تنظيم اشتراكي فلسطيني وطني اللي إجا ودعا لحل ديمقراطي بهاي البلاد، التخلص من الانتداب يعني الاستعمار الإنجليزي، وعدم الدخول في اقتتال قومي، وإنما الوصول إلى يعني إشي بيشبه ما يطرح اليوم دولة للشعبين، دولة ديمقراطية بتضم كل الناس، ومع إضافة مهمة مع الهوية الأيديولوجية العمالية الطبقية الاشتراكية. هاي الاتحاد. بفترة بعد النكبة انقطع صدور الجريدة، ولكن رجعت وكملت، ودخلنا بهذيك الفترة مرحلة الحكم العسكري اللي امتد لحد أواسط الستينات، وكان مجرد توزيع الجريدة مخاطرة. كل هاي الفترة اللي حكيت عنها الاتحاد كانت تصدر من هون، من هذا المبنى، من درج الموارنة فوق شارع ستانتون. بهاي الحارة كبار أدبائنا كبار شعرائنا، ما هو أصلا قسم منه نشتغل بالجريدة. يعني إيميل حبيبي رئيس تحرير الجريدة، محمود درويش كان محرر بالجريدة، سميح القاسم كان محرر بالجريدة، توفيق زياد. هذا المبنى ما توقف. حتى لما الجريدة بفترة انتقلت للمقر بشارع الحريري بقلب الحي العربي العريق وادي النسناس، من الشرفة كنا نطل على كل الواد وأكثر طبعا، بس هيك في كأنك بتحس إنك أنت جزء من هالنسيج، أنت بمحلك، أنت ببلدك، أنت بحارتك. هذا المصطلح البطل اليوم موجود، أنت بحارتك، أنت بالحارة. سنوات طويلة هناك، يعني واحدة من الشغلات الكبيرة أول مرة تركنا المبنى لما تعرض لصاروخ خلال حرب 2006. أنا بذكر يومتها كنت أنا وكمان صديق بمنطقة الألمانية وسمعنا صوت، لا الانفجار كان غير شكل، كنا نسمع انفجارات، فبدينا نسمع وعم نقول وين. بذكر لإسا في شاب مارق بسيارة بقول لي جريدة الشيوعية تبعتكم هي اللي تصاوبت. هو نازل في الألمانية بن غوريون وإحنا طالعين، فإحنا جينا رأسا على الجريدة، وفعلا كانوا صار في جاي شرطة وغيره، بس الواجهة تبعت الحيط، الواجهة تبع الجريدة فعلا مهدم. فهاي كانت المرة الأولى اللي طلعنا من هذاك المبنى، صار ترميم ورجعنا. طبعا لاحقا احنا ضلينا بهذاك المبنى، وبعدين لعدة ظروف احنا انتقلنا لهون. إلنا للرفاق والرفيقات اللي بالجريدة في معنى رمزي وسياسي وتاريخي لهاي الرجعة. من هون بدوا الكبار، من هون بدي هذا المشروع اللي كان لسان حال، هن سموا لحالهم لسان حال العمال العرب، لسان حال العمال الفلسطيني، العمال العرب بفلسطين. فإنك أنت ترجع ترتبط بالبدايات، إشي يحمل مخزون وشحنة مشرقة جدا وبهية جدا وكبيرة جدا.
Yeah, so before 3 years, there was no such map of Haifa. Therefore, it was easy for Haifa municipality to tell me that there was no data and to continue erasing and demolishing. Today, due to the incredible work of the multidisciplinary team, we have developed this indigenous map of Haifa. The map will be open, free, interactive, under constant progress, can be added to all the time, and useful for every researcher, activist, decision maker, and Haifa lovers in general. And at last, I want to tell you personally that when I was working on the project, I felt how in such moments and in front of, when you see the destruction in front of your eyes and the erasure, how we start looking under the rubbles on the remains of a past to rebuild a future. The thing, that thing, of course, is for us, but it's definitely for the ones who left, but it is also for those who will be. And then we need the map. We will need a kharita. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Orwa. This really rich, fantastic presentation, to this opportunity to learn about your work. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is, the part of a series that you organized on reconstruction, reconstitution, that really emphasized and centered counter-hegemonic ways of thinking about reconstruction, bottom-up ways of thinking about reconstruction, justice-oriented ways of thinking about reconstruction, and ways of thinking about reconstruction that are Palestinian-centered. And your work kind of emblemizes all of those dimensions, which I think also speak to the kind of broader vision of the New Directions in Palestinian Studies initiative. You mentioned Professor Bashar Dumani at the outset, and certainly this, I think, kind of reflects his vision and speaks to his vision of what Palestinian studies can and should be. Your presentation on Haifa also reminds us, kind of in conversation with the earlier webinars, panel discussions, exhibitions on Gaza, that although Gaza is the most recent and in some ways the kind of most spectacular act of demolition in Palestine, that we do have a kind of a longer history, right? A kind of a longer century of colonial destruction, but also a long history of Palestinian response to destruction, of Palestinian reconstitution, rebuilding, reconstruction, that we should also be looking to and learning from as well. So I really appreciate that your presentation brings that in as well. And I appreciate that you brought in your personal story at the beginning, which also kind of helps us think about the relationship between the individual or the personal and the community, the collective, but also this kind of question of engaged scholarship, right? That kind of what we do as academics is kind of sometimes prompted by and often relevant to and should speak to as well these kinds of direct policy kinds of concerns, right? There was a lack of a map or a lack of data that was being used to inform a particular kind of political project. And as a kind of academic, as a kind of scholar activist, right, you kind of took that as an invitation to produce that data, to produce that map, which I think is important when we think about the role of engaged scholarship, something that at CMES at Brown that has been kind of at the core of what we do. So I think that was really important. And also kind of your story also speaks to this kind of idea of de-exceptionalizing Palestine, right? Kind of that scholarship on London is not disconnected from scholarship on Palestine, right? That we have to kind of think about the world in broader terms, that the Middle East is connected to other parts of the world, that Palestine is not a kind of completely exceptional place, that although it has its particularities, it can be used to think about other places, and other places can be used to think about it. And your work also kind of is an invitation and an amazing example of what it looks like to do multidisciplinary work, what it looks like to think about scholarship as a kind of multimedia practice, right? As we kind of move into the future, increasingly, we have to think about what it means to do research that isn't just kind of going to be written words on a page, and how do we wrangle with that? The kind of relationship between materiality and subjectivity, I think, again, kind of something that your work really brings to the fore. So there's so much we can talk about. I'm going to open it up to questions in a moment, and I'm going to ask you to turn on your microphone and ask the question into the microphone when you ask a question, because we are recording this. I'm going to kind of put a few things on the table before I turn to the questions. I'm going to abuse my position as the moderator, but also maybe give people a chance to think of questions that they have. One question I have is about temporality, and how you kind of think about temporality, or how you kind of deal with this question, right? Because as you showed us, cities are dynamic, right? To say Haifa before 1948, that as if it's one thing, right? Haifa before 1948, Haifa in 1947 looked different from Haifa in 1943, looked different from Haifa in 1942, right? You showed us even the destruction does not stop in 1948, right? In 2006, we have the Ittihad offices being destroyed. So how do you think about kind of the role of temporality in mapping? And perhaps in a kind of related question, how do you think about, certainly this is a multimedia project, something that brings together all these different things, but how do you think about hierarchy in that, right? Which material get priority over others. If you have a British map that says something and an interview that says another thing, how do you deal with those inconsistencies? But even if you have two interviews that tell you two different things, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with it in terms of presentation, right? How to present certain things as a map and other things as a video, or kind of thinking about this kind of question of the hierarchies of knowledge, how to represent different kinds of knowledge, who to represent, whose knowledge takes priority. I'll maybe take a question or two now, and then we can kind of do additional questions if folks have them. Kati. Yeah,
Thank you, Alex.
Very inspiring project. Thank you so much, Orwa. And I actually want to, I have several questions, but one is building directly also or relates to Alex's question. And I'm thinking about the urban committee that met after 1967 in Jerusalem and discussed how to integrate ruins, whether to destroy the entire, to eliminate all the rubbles, to transform East Jerusalem, specifically the Jewish quarter, into an archaeological garden, or to integrate residential areas with archaeological remains. And ultimately, the decision was to rebuild modern residences, but also integrate some archaeological remains, very often underground, located underneath the modern houses. And the focus there was on exclusively Jewish layers, or layers in history that would highlight the Jewish narrative and the connection between the Israeli identity and Iron Age and Roman period Jerusalem. So I was wondering if you do integrate any archaeological remains into your, where do you stop? Do you just begin with the modern foundation of Haifa in the 18th century, or do you go sometimes earlier? I mean, there are like 1,300 years of Islamic heritage, largely Islamic heritage, with the exception of the Crusader period. And two other things that are related to Jerusalem. I remember at a different occasion you mentioned that you mentioned now that synagogues were destroyed, and that was actually also the case in Jerusalem. A lot of synagogues and yeshivot were destroyed. So is there any interest to restore also synagogues? And then you did not talk about any of the reconstruction efforts or remapping of domestic structures. I know that in Jerusalem, a lot of the neighborhoods from the Ottoman period, where like Talbieh and Bakka, were all populated by Jewish immigrants, and very often, ironically, by lefty Israelis. And how does it look in Haifa? Are any of the is any of the original indigenous population still living in these buildings, or were they repurposed, occupied? Yeah, and I can't wait to see the reaction of the committee that kicked you out, and the reception generally of the population, the Palestinian population. But also I would love to see the reaction of Jewish Israelis who have eclipsed the memory of largely of pre-48. A lot of questions, sorry.
Yeah, two more questions.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so Nadia and then Mustafa. And then
Thank you.
Okay. My question is far more pedestrian than Kadi's. I mean, first of all, I feel really privileged that we had a whole month of learning from your work, your project, and I really appreciate it. So I'm really lousy reading maps. Okay, so I need directions using your sort of metaphor. And I had that a little bit, that same sense when we listened to the project focusing on Gaza. So I understand how digital maps that you reconstruct, how they help to reimagine the city, okay? But I guess what I fail to understand, or where I would like you to sort of clarify to us, how do you bridge the digital mapping, the reimagining with rebuilding, given everything we know about the context? So how do you get there?
Can you clarify it more?
Well, I mean, I don't understand how we get from a map to rebuilding, given that politically everything speaks against it. Mm-hmm. So what is the strategy? What are, I guess, using your metaphor, so what are the strategic, give me directions to use the map?
Perfect. Yes, Mustafa.
Thank you so much, Orwa. This is amazing. Thank you for all your work. I really enjoyed the videos and for talking to us. And also specific questions. Would you mind going back in the slides just a bit, I think, till I find it? Oh, actually, the three, no, more forward. Here, yeah. I just wanted clarification. I'm really confused by what resilience by neoliberal decolonial economy means. I was just thinking, I feel like from a lot of the literature that I've encountered and a lot of the organizing spaces I've been in, I've seen a lot of the links between settler colonialism and capitalism. And I've not really been as much exposed to ideas of how neoliberalism can be decolonial or capitalism can be decolonial. And so I'm curious to learn more about that.
Perfect. Okay, great. So where to start? I will start with Mustafa. So, like Mustafa, I think, we were used to think through certain frameworks and certain languages, especially when we want to criticize power relations, right? And especially coming from radical literature, and that comes mainly from Marxist, neo-Marxist approaches. But these approaches are that connects also to my previous research about when I spoke about the West and the location of groups in the North and the global North. So all these frameworks can't explain what's going on in a context where the Palestinians, as an indigenous, are using these dark, let's say, sides of politics, such as capitalism, in order to promote their decolonial agenda. For example, the Khashabi theater. So now their main approach was to be independent from the state, to have a collective indigenous economy, by doing that through building a bar in a gentrified area. So this is an area that's like facing gentrification, and they are part of the gentrification. If you think about it, they are gentrifiers, but in the same time they are against gentrification. So, because when you use when the state with drones, this is what I found interesting, and I found it only through the findings, where I saw how Palestinians used capitalist tools and practices to reclaim their spaces, to restore the mosque, or to restore their presence, and to return to the old city that was demolished, and now it's governmental area and etc. So Khashabi is a great example where, through building a bar, but the ruins of the space itself, the materiality that connects also to what you said, Alex, made this bar drinking beer experience as a cultural resistance experience, right? And their concept of private ownership, that is also a neoliberal capitalist concept, right? Because indigenous ownerships are collective, mainly. But they are now thinking how we gonna play as a real estate company or a real estate project or a player in order to reclaim our spaces. So that shows you how the practices of the Palestinians around the ruins of their city shifts this framework of capitalism, for example, to their decolonial agenda, and also shifts their steadfastness as sumud, facing everything, and to become a resilient, adaptive nature of it. So that economic logic make around the ruins and the relations with the people make this shift happen. Okay, this is what I saw. The other thing, Nadia, about the digital and reimagining and the map. So first, the map give me the ability, digitization as a tool that give us the ability to see different layers of histories in the same spot. Okay, and this is a very powerful tool. Like, you can't understand. I can, like, when we're building the website now, so in one click I can see Haifa before 48 on a layer that Haifa today, with a layer of different practices, stories that we're telling through mapping. Also, for example, the return of Samir to the hammam. So you can click on the hammam and you can see the video that or you can click on other sites, you will see photos and text about it. You see the narrative. So this digital tool enable us to bring the narrative, to spatialize it through a map that can give us different layers that tells us the story of Haifa and its resilience. So when you see Haifa before 48, and you will see it today, and you will see how the Palestinians survived and revived and returned to their demolished spaces and reclaimed it, the map is a very strong tool to give us this multidimensional articulation. Yeah. So the rebuilding.
Yes.
So it's not enough. So through the map, we also now understanding what is today, what's happening today, and what was there. Okay, so if you can look at this, the restorative model. Yeah. So the rebuilding. So if you look at this parking lot, the map tells us from above these places, but we can't understand them from the map only. So we need to go to the images, but also the images can't tell us exactly what's happening there. So we need to go to the refugees to understand from them how it used to be lived, not only how it's formed as a structure, as a physical structure. So this combination of learning from refugees and from oral history, of course, and also readings, analyzing the spaces itself and their uses. Here was a house. Underneath, there was a market. Besides it, there was a square. Another example, when you look at the map, you will see all these stairs. You see many stairs, okay? So when I asked historians, and all of them told me that these are stairs that are private for the buildings. But when I interviewed refugees, they told me something else, that there were public stairs attached to private houses, taking people to rooftop passages, right? This is a story that we never, I'm an expert of Haifa, I was born and raised in the city, I never was told about the story. I never knew that we had 13 khans, right? Or we had all this heritage. So through the mapping, the spatiality, the spatial tracing, it's not enough, but this is the basic. And you have to add on it the analysis of the narrative and the practices and the living ways. But the living ways also don't give you the reality, because you need the map. So that's why when you go to interviews with refugees, you have, for example, Palestinian Remembered website, you have 30 interviews with refugees. When you see the interviews and like ours, you want to understand Haifa how it was composed. So you need to have this spatial analysis combined together.
Okay,
that's another layer. That is the basic move to make the restoration. But then you need the planning tools. I'm not a historian, I'm an urban planner. So here comes the urban planning tools, where you restore the DNA, this demolished heritage DNA that was hybrid, that semi-public-private relations, the relation between a khan and a market and a house. What do you mean? So planning is always an imaginative, right? So we put an imagination.
Restoration projects are very isolated cases of churches and mosques.
No. We focus, the restoration model is focused on the parking lot only, right? The urban planning model, which take us from seeing the parking lot, understanding how it used to be, understanding from the refugees how it used to be lived, and then taking us to the plan itself. This is urban planning stuff. Now we are rebuilding it through restoring the demolished DNA, physical DNA, for the Palestinians today in Haifa and for the future. That's why we focus on the parking lot, not on other phantasmatic, I could, for example, restore the place of this tower, but we choose to do this on the empty parking lots, in order to make it also possible for the Palestinians today to take this plan, go to the municipality, advocate for it, and maybe also persuade the municipality to agree to make this project happen. And it's possible. That's why the restorative model, how we think about it, is a tool for agency, not only a fantasy. Another point related to your, just a minute, okay. Kathy, the relations between Jews and in Haifa and Jews and Arabs in general, we were told a story that is totally false. We were told that there was separated neighborhoods, for example, right? You had a Muslim neighborhood. The hegemonic narrative about Haifa history says that there was a Muslim neighborhood, Christian neighborhood, and Jewish neighborhood. Yeah, when I went to the maps, I discovered that these synagogues, 5 synagogues that were demolished in 1948 by Israel, they were rented partially from Muslim Waqf properties. And I couldn't get to this fact without the map and without mapping the archives, right? And facing it with the reality. And what I discovered from the interviews with the refugees, that they were living together also with hybrid neighborhoods. So the British segregated the city before it got demolished totally. So because of that, I think, as an optimistic approach, the restoration also of the relations between Jews and Arabs in Palestinian cities in general can give us also hope how we can restore also the relations as a concept of justice for the future, as a political agenda. Aboud? Last thing, sorry. We don't have time. Alex is the
Quick question. Quickly.
I guess looking at Haifa today, I know there's Palestinian neighborhoods like Wadi Salib and Al Maniya, and then up in the hills is like the Israelis. What is the relation, especially after the war, of the imposing like Israelis upon Palestinians and disrupting their properties? And it was like hinted at the video, but since 7th of October, how has that dynamic changed? I know from like friends who in Haifa that they got kicked out of the Technion, they got kicked out of Haifa University, and they were no longer welcomed in neighborhoods that were once theirs. How has that dynamic changed like rehabilitation efforts?
Yeah, so answering quick also to your point, Alex, and to yours, I think that this, connecting what's happening in Palestine with what's happening in different cities, and also thinking about restoration of demolished spaces, not only in context of herbicides, also with context of natural disasters. And like imagine a tsunami raising a city and then you want to rebuild it. What happened to the community, their narrative, their heritage, their relations, their how they used to live, there's a right to continuity. So because of that, I think this method that we're developing that brings these different multidisciplinary tools can also be copied to other cases, not only war, post-war or under-war cases. And Aboud, so the relations are always, disrupted by all these different events, and it's always like that. But in the same time, what was fascinating for me to see that there's a DNA that also of the relations of Haifa, that because it was also there was a coexistence, let's say, in its historical development, that is also maintaining a type of resilience for the Palestinians, right? That's why you will see that they are part in the coalition of the municipalities in Haifa. They are part of the coalition in the municipality. They are very strong in the municipality. I was a member and I managed to change stuff. So this idea that the Palestinians are victims and, oppressed, I'm against that. I see how, despite everything is happening, agency operates and relations are rebuilt always.
Thank you, Orwa. Please join me in thanking
Thank you.